When Robert Langston, a millionaire CEO, disguised himself as a homeless man to visit his own car showroom, he uncovered shocking truths about his staff. But what happened at the end was unforgettable. Robert Langston stood outside, the luxury car showroom he owned but rarely visited. His old hoodie, ripped jeans, and dirty sneakers made him look like someone who didn't belong. He dressed this way on purpose. Rumors had reached him that employees were rude to customers who didn't appear wealthy. He wanted to find out if it was true. The bright lights inside the showroom reflected off the polished cars, showcasing wealth and status. Robert walked in, immediately feeling the weight of the stares from staff. The pristine floors and high-end vehicles contrasted sharply with his scruffy appearance. A young salesman, sharply dressed and oozing confidence, noticed him first. He didn't hide his disapproval as he approached. The salesman asked Robert what he was doing there, his tone curt. He made it clear he didn't think Robert belonged. When Robert said he was just looking, the salesman's smirk grew wider. He questioned whether Robert knew the price of the cars and told him to check out the used car dealership down the road. The words were dismissive, and Robert could feel the condescension in the air. Before Robert could reply, the showroom manager arrived. He asked what was happening, and the salesman immediately took control of the narrative. He told the manager that Robert was wasting their time. The manager, without even addressing Robert properly, glanced at his clothes and told him that if he wasn't planning to buy, he should leave. Robert felt anger rise but kept his composure. He nodded, said he understood, and walked out without another word. The employee's behavior confirmed the rumors. They judged people based on appearance alone, assuming anyone who didn't look rich was unworthy of their time. As he walked down the street, Robert's mind raced. This wasn't the vision he had for his business when he took over the company. He'd invested in the business with the idea that it would be a place where innovation and respect thrived. Yet here he was, experiencing firsthand how shallow and disrespectful his staff had become. The gleaming showroom, the polished cars, they were meaningless if the people running the place treated others like dirt. Robert headed to a nearby park to sit and think. The bench creaked as he sat, watching the world go by. He thought about the next steps. He couldn't simply storm back in and fire everyone. He needed to understand how deep this problem ran. Was this just a few bad employees, or was the entire culture of the company toxic? He decided to spend the next few days observing. He would visit other business locations he owned in the city, still in disguise, to see if the issue was widespread. He made a mental note to pay attention to how customers were treated, especially those who didn't fit the showroom's ideal image. If the problem was systemic, it would require a complete overhaul of the company's values and training. The next day, Robert visited another dealership across town. This location was smaller but just as upscale. As he stepped inside, the reaction was stunningly similar. A receptionist gave him a wary glance before looking away, clearly uninterested in offering help. When he walked up to ask about a specific car model, she hesitated before answering, her tone dismissive. Robert pretended not to notice and moved further into the showroom. A different salesman approached him, but the attitude was the same. This one didn't bother to hide his irritation when Robert asked a question about a car's features. He gave short, clipped answers and kept glancing over Robert's shoulder, as if hoping for a real customer to save him from the interaction. Once again, Robert left feeling disappointed but determined. By the end of the week, Robert had visited 3 more locations. Each time he encountered the same behavior. Staff members prioritized wealthy-looking customers, offered minimal help to others, and sometimes outright ignored those they deemed unworthy of their time. It wasn't just one bad apple. It was a company-wide issue. Sitting at his desk that evening, Robert reviewed everything he'd experienced. He felt a mix of anger and sadness. His business had lost its way. It was clear that changes needed to be made, starting from the top. Training programs, stricter hiring standards, and a complete cultural shift were necessary to fix the problem. More importantly, he wanted to instill values that emphasized respect and inclusivity. Robert made a plan. First, he would hold a meeting with the top management team to discuss his findings. He wouldn't reveal his undercover visits just yet, but he would bring up concerns about the company's image and customer experience. He wanted to see how they responded and whether they were willing to admit there was a problem. After that, he would roll out surprise evaluations at all the showrooms, giving employees no time to prepare or put on a show. These evaluations would include secret shoppers who, like Robert, would test the staff's behavior. Finally, Robert decided he would personally address the employees who had mistreated him. Robert's plan was simple but ambitious. He started by identifying the locations with the highest sales and the best reputations. If poor behavior was happening even in these locations, it would confirm that the issue ran deep. The next morning, Robert disguised himself again, adding a fake limp to his walk to make his appearance even more convincing. At the first dealership of the day, the atmosphere was bustling. A salesman approached him reluctantly, but his body language screamed annoyance. Without making eye contact, the salesman brushed off Robert's questions about a specific luxury sedan, claiming it was out of stock, even though Robert had seen it parked outside moments earlier. When Robert pointed this out, the salesman dismissed him entirely, saying the car was already reserved for a serious buyer. Leaving the location, Robert noted how easily the salesman had lied. It wasn't just rudeness anymore. It was a complete disregard for integrity. He decided to try a different approach at the next location. This time, Robert acted as though he were serious about buying a car. He asked detailed questions about financing and features, pushing the staff to engage with him. Despite his efforts, the reactions were similar. A saleswoman rolled her eyes when he asked about installment plans, and another employee directed him to brochures instead of answering his questions directly. In one moment of irony, a young trainee seemed willing to help him, but their enthusiasm was quickly shut down by a senior staff member who whispered something to them. After that, the trainee avoided Robert completely. This interaction planted a new question in his mind. Were there employees who genuinely wanted to do the right thing but felt pressured to conform? Robert made mental notes of every encounter, carefully documenting the patterns. He realized that the toxic culture might not just be allowed but actively encouraged by certain managers. This added a new layer to his plan. Fixing this issue would mean addressing not only behavior, but also the leadership that allowed it. By the end of the day, Robert returned to his office with a clear picture of what needed to change. He opened a spreadsheet and began outlining potential solutions, from leadership training to anonymous feedback systems for employees. As he worked late into the night, one thought kept circling back. How many of his workers genuinely believed this behavior was acceptable? The next step was clear. He needed to go even deeper into the system. The open question remained: if some employees were complicit, were others waiting for a chance to do the right thing? He would have to create a way to find out. Robert realized that solving the problem required more than secret visits. He needed insight into how managers communicated with their teams. If they were promoting or tolerating this behavior, it had to be addressed directly. He decided to organize a mandatory meeting with regional managers under the guise of a strategy review. The meeting was scheduled in one of the company's conference rooms. Managers from all the locations arrived, most carrying laptops, and prepared for what they thought would be a standard presentation on quarterly goals. Robert entered in his usual business attire, greeting them casually. The contrast between this and his undercover role struck him as he observed the confident body language of people who had no idea what he had seen. During the meeting, Robert asked open-ended questions about their customer service policies. He watched closely as managers gave polished answers about treating all customers equally. Yet when pressed on how they ensured it, their answers faltered. Some managers admitted that their focus was on high-value clients because they drove sales. Others avoided the question altogether. Robert made note of who avoided eye contact and who seemed defensive. Then he posed a simple question: how do we handle customers who don't look like they belong here? The room fell silent, and Robert could feel the tension rise. One manager hesitated before saying, "We try to help, but sometimes it's clear they aren't serious buyers." It was the exact attitude Robert had witnessed firsthand. But rather than confront them, he ended the meeting by saying he planned to visit showrooms in the coming weeks to observe their strategies in action. The announcement left the managers visibly uneasy, exactly as Robert had intended. Later that week, Robert launched an anonymous feedback system for employees at all levels. He hoped to uncover the perspective of staff members who might not feel comfortable speaking out. Within days, responses started pouring in. Several employees voiced concerns about favoritism and the pressure to prioritize wealthy-looking clients. One even mentioned being reprimanded for spending too much time assisting a young man who seemed unlikely to buy. Among the responses, Robert spotted a few from employees who genuinely cared about providing good service but felt unsupported. These were the people he needed to empower. He began drafting a plan to identify and elevate those who aligned with the values he wanted to restore. Still, the most pressing issue remained. Would the toxic managers resist change, or could they be convinced to adapt? Robert decided to make his next moves public, knowing the ripple effect would be significant. The open question lingered. How far would the pushback go once everyone realized his true intentions? 2 weeks later, Robert scheduled a company-wide meeting at the headquarters. Every manager and senior staff member was required to attend, along with select employees from each dealership. The air was thick with curiosity and tension as everyone gathered in the large conference hall. Rumors had been circulating about Robert's recent activity, but no one knew the full story. Robert walked onto the stage, dressed in his usual sharp suit. He greeted the room, his expression serious but calm. "Over the past few weeks, I've taken a closer look at our company," he began. "I've been to multiple locations, not as your CEO, but as a customer. I've seen things that deeply concern me." The room fell silent. Whispers rippled through the crowd as the weight of his words sank in. Robert described his undercover visits, detailing the dismissive attitudes, the lies, and the favoritism he had experienced firsthand. He spoke of the culture he had witnessed, one that valued appearances over character and integrity. "I know some of you might be wondering why I'm telling you this," Robert continued. "It's because change starts now. This company was built on innovation, respect, and inclusivity. We cannot succeed if those values are missing." He then revealed the anonymous feedback system results, sharing key insights without naming individuals. Many employees looked uncomfortable, while a few nodded in agreement. Robert emphasized the importance of treating every customer with respect, regardless of how they looked or what assumptions were made about them. Finally, he addressed the managers directly. "Leadership sets the tone. If you've allowed this behavior, you've failed, not just the company but your teams and our customers. There will be accountability." The room tensed as Robert announced immediate changes: a new training program focused on customer service, leadership evaluations, and the appointment of employees who had demonstrated true commitment to the company's values. Several toxic managers were dismissed on the spot, their names called out in front of the assembly. But Robert wasn't finished. "One more thing," he said, pausing to let the silence deepen. "I've learned that judgment based on appearances is not just an issue in how we treat our customers, but also in how we see potential employees." He announced a new initiative: partnerships with local shelters and organizations to offer job opportunities to people experiencing homelessness. The room erupted in murmurs, but Robert pressed on. "There are people out there who have the drive, the potential, and the hunger to succeed. We will give them that chance." The announcement shocked many, but it planted seeds of hope. Over the following weeks, job fairs were held in collaboration with shelters, and a handful of new employees joined the company. They were paired with mentors who helped them adapt and grow within the business. As the meeting ended, Robert's final words lingered. "We are not just selling cars. We are building trust, one interaction at a time. If you can't uphold that, you don't belong here." Weeks later, the company began to transform. Employees who had been overshadowed by toxic leaders found their voices. Customers noticed the change, praising the improved service. The new hires brought fresh perspectives and a renewed sense of purpose. The company's reputation slowly began to rebuild, stronger than before. The story of the CEO who went undercover spread beyond the business. It became a lesson in leadership and the power of taking action, no matter how uncomfortable. For Robert, it wasn't just about saving his company. It was about ensuring its legacy reflected the values he had always believed in and offering hope to those who needed it most.